What is up, martial arts fanatics? Welcome back. As always, I'm Coach Greg, and today I'm doing something a little bit different on our system breakdowns, where I'm breaking down not one, not two, but three different fighters, doing a compare and contrast of pioneers of Judo in MMA. So today we're specifically covering Ronda Rousey. We're going to cover Fedor Emelianenko, who is highly requested, and then I'm also going to do Karo Parisyan, who I think was another great early judoka in MMA. And these guys really paved the way for a lot of things that came later on, particularly when you look at a lot of guys like Islam Makhachev and the way that they pursued judo takedowns from a clinch and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff that we saw out of these early guys like Ronda Rousey, Karo Parisyan, and Fedor Emelianenko are really great examples of things that still take place today. And they really kind of set the stage for how to engage in the clinch if you're going to use that type of a game. Okay, so stay tuned and let's start breaking these guys down. All right, guys, so let's start with Fedor. Fedor Emelianenko is a master of sport in Sambo, master of sport in Judo, and this just monstrosity of a fighter who just kind of looks like everybody's dad. He's just a normal-looking guy, but this guy could bang. There's a couple things he did that I found really interesting. Now, like all these Judo guys, they had one common goal, and that was to get an upper body control. They wanted to get to some sort of a clinch. So they had to do this in the right way. So in the case of Fedor, what you see is a lot of, like, he would lead with the jab a lot, but what he would almost always do is throw a lot of the right hand. And he would overthrow it, putting his head way to the outside. And what you generally saw was him overthrowing it, dropping his head, and using this to swim underneath to get to some sort of a clinch. Now, what's interesting is he made his next step then, as he swam in, his next step went straight for the Kusotogari as he came around and fell right into it. That was usually his first attack. Now, once he got to the clinch, he had a lot of different options. We're gonna get to that in a second. But the first thing I wanna touch on is what happens if he didn't get it. And this was really great. He would throw this big right hand, and if he didn't get it, he would come up really high with his big left. And this is something that we kind of see out of the Alex Pereira. We talk about that right there, overthrowing the right to load up for that left hook. Fedor did something very similar, where from the outside, he might throw this jab, throw the big right. If he didn't hit it, come up real high with this big left hook. And he usually liked to cover a lot of range because the reason he threw it is guys were backing up. They all knew what he wanted. They didn't want to stay in range. So as soon as he threw, they were trying to back up. And so he knew this, and he would compensate by doing that. Now, once he got to a clinch, this was all kind of easy peasy for him. You know, if he came in here, underhook, overhook, kind of didn't even really matter. He would just try to get his arms around you in some way or another, get to some sort of an overhook, underhook, get to some sort of a body control. And he was so good at Kazushi. This is really what made Fedor truly fantastic, is his ability to understand where people's balance are. And depending on what they did, he did different things. He would often do outside trips. He would do inside trips, do the ouchigari, right? He did this like knee block thing where he would block the foot and tilt them. He also did like saseyas, where as they started coming back this way, he would block and throw this way. He would do a lot of lateral drops. I don't necessarily recommend doing that from here, but you know, he's Fedor. He can kind of get away with that stuff. So you see a lot of that type of stuff out of Fedor. And really the common trend is that whichever way he felt their balance breaking, if he felt them breaking to the back corner, he'd come over top and knee pick, right? If he felt them coming to this corner, Kusotogari, right? If he felt them coming to like straight back, or if they denied the Kusotogari, he would come through ouchigari, right? And so on and so forth. So he kind of had a move for every direction on the compass, and he would just get in here, get to some sort of an overhook, underhook, get to double unders, double overs, didn't matter. He just got to a body clinch. Entered in here, stepped through, and no matter where they went, he had a solution. That was really the key to Fedor's game. Now, once he got him on the ground, a lot of his game, this is where everybody's a little bit different in how they approached it. One of the things I find with a lot of the early judokas is I think that, with the exception of Ronda Rousey, you know, Fedor and Karo Parisyan, I think they were both good on the ground, but they weren't really dominant on the ground. They were great at getting it there, but it's not like today where you talk about like Islam Makhachev, who once he gets you there, you are really screwed. I think Ronda Rousey, this is what separated her from the other two, and we'll get to that in a minute. She was really fantastic at dominating once she got to the ground. Okay, so stay tuned. Let's get into Ronda Rousey. Okay, so Ronda Rousey is criticized a lot, rightfully so, for her boxing. But the thing you have to understand is that what she did worked well for her. until she met Holly Holm. And of course, you know, Amanda Nunes is a different animal altogether, right? She's just so dominant. She hits so hard. She hits you once and you have like brain trauma. With Ronda Rousey, though, a lot of what she did was a blitz style punching that was high volume. And you still see this used today. You see Jessica Andrade do this, right? You see a bunch of other fighters who they kind of blitz their way in and they just start throwing. It's sloppy, but it's high volume, and the goal is to get people to back off. And all they really need to do is throw long enough to tie you up. And that's what Ronda Rousey was really great at. Her boxing was not that great, obviously. I think the boxing coach she had did work against her. I think if she had had a better striking coach, she would have gone a lot further. In fact, I kind of feel the same way about Brian Ortega. You know, I love Fedor Gracie. His jiu-jitsu stuff is amazing, but he doesn't know shit about striking. And Ronda Rousey didn't have a good striking coach, and Brian Ortega doesn't have a good striking coach. And I think if Ortega gets a really great striking coach, it'll really change his game. But I don't want to digress. Anyway, the point is that what she does works for her for the most part. I mean, there's a reason she had this fantastic rise to championship. And what she would do is she would throw some jabs and stuff. She did occasionally throw front kicks and stuff, but a lot of times it was blitzing, big punches. Why did she throw these big loopy punches? Because what she wanted was the clinch, okay? People criticize her for the big loops, but the big loops helped her, right? If she had come out straight, she could have gotten it by overshooting, but it would have been harder. By keeping them here, it contains them in the box in front of her. So high volume, pressure, blitzing, still a tactic used today, particularly in women's MMA, where they blitz in and then they wrap. And this is what Ronda did. Now from here, she had a couple different things she'd like to do. She'd either wrap to some sort of over-under, or she'd do like a headlock with an arm control a lot of times. If she couldn't get that, if they started denying that, she scooped under here and she went to this half back position. All of these positions work really well for her. She had different tactics kind of depending on where she went to, but she really had two primary throws that she loved to do. The ogoshi, the hip throw, and the ouchigari. She would tie these together. So she'd get to this headlock position and she'd start to turn them over for the hip throw. If they started to defend that, she'd step through, ouchigari, put them right on the ground. Same thing from here. You know, she'd get to this side control, or not side control, she'd get to the half back, she'd swim underneath, and she'd start looking to step through to hip throw, or she'd start looking to come through here. And what's great about this position, though, from this underhook and from here, is they both worked well to set up her armbar. Before we get to that, I want to touch on, she did also, if she, you know, if they had underhooks and she just had the overhook and she was defending, like backing up against a cage or something like that, you would see her do the Uchimata tactic, where she would do that line throw, come in here, overhook, and she had a lot of success with that defensively. But that wasn't what she was offensively looking for. Offensively, she was looking for the headlock, or she was looking for, if she couldn't get this and they were denying high, you know, guarding up high because they kind of felt it coming, she'd swim underneath, and now she'd get side to side on them, right? And start coming in here and start thinking about how to go through for the hip throw or the ouchigari. Both of these positions set her up really well. From the headlock position, you see this a couple times in her fights. She loses position, she gets taken down, maintains the headlock, pulls them under her, and gets to a top position. What's great about this is as she does so, as she pulls them under her, she comes up on top and she has the armbar available. So Ronda Rousey, I mentioned she had two different types of configurations for the clinch she liked to go through. One was this headlock position where she starts looking for like this Kesugatami type stuff. But part of the reason she used this is if she didn't get it and they fell on top of her, she would use this to bring them over, hip out, start to come on top. And as you can see, it starts putting her in a position to start attacking this arm. Or she could go the other way if they fell on top of her and start to roll them and come on top, right? And then she would start to attack triangles and stuff like that from on top to set up the armbar. So that was one. If she ended up more behind, right, and she ended up here, and she started stepping through for like hip throws, you'll see how as they turn in, she's already got this arm set up so that now, once again, she can start coming through and hitting an armbar. All of her judo clinches set her up for when she fell to the ground to finish with the armbar. That's why her armbars came so quick, because she set them up from standing so that as she fell into a position where the arm was extended. Okay, Karo Parisyan had a little bit of a different style, but very similar to Fedor's, probably a little bit closer to that, and a little bit of the Ronda Rousey too. The thing that I like that he did was, where Ronda Rousey had the Ouchigari and Ogoshi that she mostly went to, she did throw other things, but that was like her basis. Karo Parisyan was very much the same. His primary attack was the Osotogari to a Harai Goshi. One was a backward throw, the other one was a forward throw. So where Ronda had the Ouchigari to bring them back, and they had the Ogoshi to bring them forward, his was very similar. He would get in here, and when he got to a clinch, he was looking for a Osotogari, and then since his leg was across, if they started to try to turn back on him or push back at him, he would just rotate and go to Harai Goshi. Once again, forward, backward, right? Ping pong between those two. A lot of times the way that he would enter was very similar to Fedor's. He would stay on the outside, he liked to bang, so he would make them miss and then throw a jab cross back, still often dropping his head to the left so that he could swim under and tie up, but then he would also throw, and from this position, sometimes he would get to these tie-ups here and start to use this kind of an extension position to start to pull himself in. There he could start to go for the Osotogari across, right? There he could start to go for Harai Goshi. This type of stuff was a very common tactic of his. Now, if he could not initially get them, what you see him doing a lot of times is driving them back to the wall, using foot sweeps to constantly threaten as they're getting pushed back. This is a thing that you see him do a lot. As he pushes them back, now he changes tactics a little bit. Now, once he gets it back to the wall, he's tied up with them, and you start seeing Kosotogari on the outside pulling them in, and then also still Ouchigari to pull them in. Pulling that foot in to drop them to the ground. This is a tactic I like to use a lot against the wall as well. So essentially, he'd go for his first attacks. If he couldn't get it, he'd start to drive them back, threatening foot sweeps the whole time, and then as he gets them there, a lot of times he preferred the Kosotogari. What was great about this is he also had a tactic, knowing that as he drove guys back, common reaction is they're going to push back, right? This is Kazushi. This is Judo 101, right? He drives them back. They start to drive him back. As they do, particularly if he does not get the underhook and he ends up with this overhook position, one of the most common techniques for Judo in MMA is to do that big Harai Goshi from here. And once again, he would go to it from that overhook. So he'd start to drive them back, using the foot sweeps, threatening to push him back, going for the Kosotogari. If they started to push back, he just turned and went with it. This is why there was that whole thing with Diego Sanchez, judo crap doesn't work on me. And he's like, oh yeah? Let me show you. The other thing that he would do is if he tended to walk them back, what I like that he did, that I think the other, Ronda and Fedor didn't do, he blended a lot of wrestling in. And this is where he would get them back and he'd start to get that double leg, lift them up and drop them. That was a very effective technique that he did against the wall. So he had another directional change. And we talk about this in our own wall tactics, is having chain wrestling. And he would do the same thing. He'd come in here, he'd start to threaten this kind of stuff, or he'd start to drop down, go for the double leg. If they start to push him back, Harai Goshi. This stuff was super duper effective for him. So then, once he got them onto the ground, there's one other thing I want to talk about that he did, and that was his use of the Kimura grip. I have mixed opinions on this. I get why he did it. From here, a lot of times, he would come in here and get to a Kimura grip. So he would enter into this clinch situation or throw bombs, getting into here, sacrifice this, coming over the top, get to the Kimura position, and here he would throw his Osotogari. Here he would throw his Harai Goshi, but he would also throw a Sumageashi where he would come in here and roll back into it. The thing that I like about this is it does give him a lot of control over that upper body, which is great for Judo. What I don't like is when he ended up on the ground, he often ended up in very precarious positions. Now, he worked his way out of it, but it was not really ending in an advantageous position because he was half exposing his back, and the only thing that saved him was keeping that Kimura grip. I personally would have liked to have seen him walk his feet out and come through. I'll show that in a second. But he ended up in kind of a precarious position using this. But I wanted to touch on, as he gets into here, getting to that Kimura position and using that to get his takedowns. So Ronda Rousey, I mentioned she had two different types of configurations for the clinch she liked to go through. One was this headlock position where she starts looking for like this Kesagatami type stuff. But part of the reason she used this is if she didn't get it, and they fell on top of her, she would use this to bring them over, hip out, start to come on top. And as you can see, it starts putting her in a position to start attacking this arm. Or she could go the other way if they fell on top of her and start to roll them and come on top, right? And then she would start to attack triangles and stuff like that from on top to set up the arm bar. So that was one. If she ended up more behind, right, and she ended up here, and she started stepping through for like hip throws, you'll see how as they turn in, she's already got this arm set up so that now, once again, she can start coming through and hitting an arm bar. All of her judo clinches set her up for when she fell to the ground to finish with the arm bar. That's why her arm bars came so quick, because she set them up from standing so that as she fell into a position where the arm was extended. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about today is a couple things that are commonalities between them. One of them is catching kicks was a very big common thing. As they caught here, throwing a bomb behind it. That was a common tactic to get guys down. Catching here and knee picking, right? All this kind of stuff. It's really basically, as they're in here, they're always looking for kicks. So they come up here, catch it, and start to drive forward. The other thing that you see as a tendency between all of them is the tendency to switch to striking to the body when the hips go back. As I come into here, Fedor does this a bunch where he starts throwing knees to the body as the hips come back, right? You see this a little bit out of Karo Parisyan. He'll even go to like a plum clinch and start throwing from like a tie clinch. Also throw in, as they start to disengage, throw in the left, right on the disengage. So he comes in here, gets to his clinch, and as they start to back away, throws bombs behind him. You know, Amanda Nunes had a fight that she finished like that, where she gets to a clinch, ties them up against the cage. I can't remember who it was. I don't think it was Beth Carrera. I'd have to look that up. I don't remember off the top of my head, but one of them, she gets in here. She just throws a big knee to the body from here as she starts working them up against the cage, throws a big knee and manages to drop her. That type of stuff is really instrumental. It's that whole concept we talked about, the Islam Makhachev breakdown. As the hips come back, you start attacking the body. As the hips come forward, you start getting your throws. Fedor didn't need to do it as much, but he did certainly do this, where he would attack the body as the hips came back. But a lot of times, if the hips came back, this is where you start seeing him go for things like sese, because like I said, he works on that compass where he's got a foot throw, block, and just using kazushi. That's really all his game is. He ties them up, whichever direction he starts to feel them, he blocks. So his game was not as dependent on that as the other two who had like two dominant throws, and then if the hips came back, they just start throwing knees to the body, or if they disengage, start throwing punches. That was really kind of the basis of what they did. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this system breakdown. It's a little bit different from the other ones. Let me know in the comments what you think and share with your friends.